Whilst now, I mean, obviously the whole world is engulfed in the issue with Gaza, and it's been going on now for more than 8 months, now coming close to 9 months. One of the elements that I find quite sobering is that whilst we're talking about Palestine since 1948, particularly from the Nakba of 1948, just before that, we had a very similar crisis, but which unfortunately gets very little attention for a variety of reasons, and that is Kashmir. The issue of Kashmir has been now going on for over 76 years, 77 years, and if I'm correct, and I'm going to learn from you, there is no end in sight. I mean, obviously, the struggle for liberation sometimes takes decades, sometimes even more. But in reality, I mean, whilst there are, you know, when we talk about Palestine, we're talking about certain resolutions, you know, whether it be the two-state solution, the one-state solution, whatever it is, but no one seems to be proposing anything for Kashmir. And that I find tragic, and I find almost incomprehensible. However, I'm going to learn from you. Tell me a little bit.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Anas. I think, firstly, I want to thank you, the TV channel, and the audience for their time on Kashmir. Rightly so, as you pointed out. I think this world's kind of seen two of the oldest issues, and both are related to the Muslim areas where the Muslims are majority. Palestine, which is a hot topic in the media on the international level at the moment since last 8 months. And then you got the Kashmir. Pretty much started, in fact, Kashmir started a little bit before Palestine, when we look at 1946. The struggle for the Kashmiri Muslims started well before the partition of India and Pakistan. We're looking back in the 1930s, in fact, 1846, when the British government gave away Kashmir to Maharaja Hari Singh, who was a non-Muslim ruler, in return for his help during the war.
When was this? Around
This
what
was
time?
around 1846, and the whole of Kashmir,
So a century before.
a century before,
Right.
was given to a non-Muslim ruler, a very tyrannical ruler who was a Sikh by religion,
Right.
Whereas the majority of the people in Kashmir were Muslims. So the rule was really, really bad. The Muslims were massively hard prosecuted.
So hang on, just on this particular point. So you're saying that in the mid-19th century, Kashmir was an identified region?
It has been an identified
Is it the same region that we're talking about today?
more or less.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Kashmir has had its own regional identity for centuries, way before India and Pakistan.
How so? What do you mean by regional identity?
It used to be called Kashmir, even in the times of the, what's his name, Alexander.
Right.
Right.
Alexander the Great, yeah.
Absolutely. It still used to be called Jammu and Kashmir. It had its own distinct culture, its identity, its boundaries, its geographical location. The religions have taken, turns. There used to be Buddhists before. Then the Muslims, alhamdulillah, came and people reverted to Islam. Majority of Kashmir Valley turned into Muslims. Kind of going back to 1846, Maharaja takes it over. Britain gives it to him without any consent of the people, without any thinking about the people. They were just sold like cattle. Why? Muslims. There was a massive tyrannical rule under the Maharaja Hari Singh. Muslims were persecuted, not the Hindus, not the Sikhs. It was the Muslims that were the target. Kind of fast forwarding to 1931s, when the people started revolting against the Maharaja, a legislative assembly was formed, which kind of sat in between the Maharaja's rule and the people, just like what we have in the United Kingdom.
But like parliament?
But it was a parliament.
Okay.
It was a legislative assembly.
Okay.
And it's a very important point to remember, because I'm going to talk about it later, why it's very important.
Okay.
So 1946, we fast forward, we have a partition between India and Pakistan. Pakistan wins its independence, India gets separated. There's a massive two-nation theory based on the religion, which is Islam. the princely states that existed, which were not directly under the British Empire, and Kashmir was one of the major princely state that was not under the British rule. Right? It was ruled by its own Maharaja. It had its own currency. It had its own legal system. It wasn't part of the British Indian Empire.
Okay.
Right? But they were given a choice, either to join Pakistan because of the Muslim majority, or to join India. The Maharaja at that time wanted to stay independent. Right? So he started signing a standstill agreement. But the people in Kashmir, because it was majority Muslims who already were against the tyrannical rule of Maharaja, revolted against that independence, revolted against the Maharaja in 1946. And this is, we talk about Holocaust.
Yeah.
Over 375,000 Muslims were martyred in 3 nights.
Oh, my God.
We've got the pictures on the internet. We've got the news from the British newspapers at that point.
At the hands of whom?
At the hands of... So this is where it was mostly Dogra forces, Maharaja forces.
Okay.
But what I have seen when I actually looked into this one, and I read through the United Nations documentations, which you've got telegrams that were sent between the people of Kashmir to Pakistan at that point requesting help. There's a clear documented evidence that the Indian forces had already landed in 1946 in Jammu, who were then the uniforms were taken out, they were given civilian clothes, and they were actually killing Muslims. Muslims were hanged, their skin was detached from their bodies while they were alive. They were skinned off, and their bodies were hanged from the trees. They were burned, their houses. That was the first, that's bigger than the Holocaust that we can ever even think of. Over 300,000 Muslims killed within 3 to 4 nights in Jammu. Right, that changed the whole demography of the Jammu region. What we see now, where the census shows the Jammu is majoritarily populated by non-Muslims, in reality, before 1946, it was majoritarily occupied by the Muslims itself. So the whole Jammu and Kashmir Valley, majority was Muslims at that point. So the partition takes place. People revolted against this idea of joining India. There was a big, massive war between India and Pakistan. This question was taken to the United Nations, and you mentioned, is there any United Nations in there? With the agreement of both India and Pakistan, so it wasn't an agreement resolution that was passed alone. There was an agreement in the United Nations, which was agreed in consultation with India and Pakistan itself, to say, okay, we'll need to give some time to...
This was around 1947?
This was 1947. In January, the first resolution was passed. Right. In the United Nations, in agreement with India and Pakistan, there was a detailed resolution passed which says, what are the people of Kashmir entitled to? So they were given a choice under the United Nations. They could either accede to the dominion of Pakistan or to the newly formed dominion of India. But the choice would need to be made ultimately by the people of Jammu and Kashmir across all the 5 regions. Now, those resolutions, as I said, were done in consultation with India and Pakistan. However, unfortunately, India has failed to fulfill them. There were specific steps, there was boundaries that were defined, there was the criteria on who could actually do the voting in terms of how the resolution would be passed. It is with the indigenous people of Jammu and Kashmir who could vote. So there were steps agreed with both India and Pakistan to say, okay, there will be a demilitarization. The military will only be present while the temporary administration is taking place around the borders and not to be seen in areas where it would intimidate or humiliate the civilians. What we see now, contrary, is we have got over 900,000 Indian armed forces in the Jammu and Kashmir Valley alone. Based on the population, that is 1 fully armed force for every 9 civilians. Can you imagine? This room full of 100 people has got 10 fully armed forces which are ready to kill you. We can see what's happening in Gaza. That's exactly what's been happening in Kashmir since. It's not the first massacre. This is not the first, what we're seeing.
So what's the applicability of what was found in the United Nations? I mean, why isn't that brought into play?
It has been tried. Unfortunately, India doesn't...
obviously, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that the United Nations, does what it says, but I mean that you have the legitimacy, or you have the validity and the legal ground to challenge the status of the Indian forces.
This is unfortunately where we have sort of got a less, the support that we have at the moment for the Kashmir, the way its geographical location, things surrounding it, the key support that we have is really from Pakistan, because it is a party to the dispute itself. The international level, we don't have that much of a support. For example, in Palestine, alhamdulillah, one thing we've got is, yes, while the Arabs have, they lost their grounds, let's say, the support they used to provide for Palestine, that amount of support isn't available for Kashmir. One, is too far away for the West. They don't really care about that one. Two, on the international level, in the present scenario, India is seen to be more viable for the West, both economically as well as ideologically against China. India is a better option for the West compared to what China is. Right, so they see. Therefore, anything to do with India, if India is killing, I mean, it's not just in Kashmir. We can see the new Modi regime since the last 2 terms. It is killing the Muslims.
Persecuting Muslims inside
the valley, Christians, but the world's overlooking it. Why? Because it's seen as a favorable economical ground for the West. It's seen as a favorable alliance partner, a strategic partner in South Asia against China, right? It's more might is right. So unfortunately, on the international level, this is where we need to kind of work together and make sure that we can garner more support so we can enforce India to implement those resolutions. Instead of implementing it, what India is trying to do is always trying to blame Pakistan for everything, right? Well, Pakistan hasn't demilitarized it because there's a resolution which says there were tribesmen that came into the Kashmir, but the tribesmen came into Kashmir to help the people of Kashmir when over 300,000 people were killed. Who could stand by? Again, those tribesmen left long time ago. That was back in 1947. There was a temporary ceasefire line that was created, right? Those tribesmen do not exist in the Indian-occupied Kashmir anymore. But that's always been used as an excuse. And now you can see with the Modi regime, they're actually trying to get rid of the 18 resolutions that we have in the United Nations, right? They're trying their best, right? They don't want to be abiding them. Unfortunately, these are under the...
So basically, I mean, from what you describe, and I think that now, and I continue to compare with Palestine for a very important reason, by the way, and that is that now, and because of the genocide, the recent genocide, more and more people are aware of the facts. Okay, whilst before for instance, when I was younger, I had to explain 1948, I had to explain what Palestine really was and the such. Now I'm finding that young people, 18, they know all the facts. They find their information. And therefore I'm comparing. So basically, you're telling me that the Indian government has adopted a sort of an approach in regards with Kashmir that is not too dissimilar to the approach by the Zionist Israeli regime.
Absolutely.
And because it's trying to change the narrative, it's creating truths, which are falsehoods, and it's trying to distance itself or to undermine international agreements and laws and resolutions. Am I more or less correct?
Absolutely. And we can see, I mean, at the moment, and we're coming to what's happening currently in Kashmir, it is the Muslim population that's been targeted. The schools that existed, the religious schools, the madrasas, right, which imparted both the academic knowledge as well as the dini knowledge, the religious knowledge to the people, they're getting shut down. They've been shut down. They've been changed. Now it's becoming compulsory. The Indian government has made it compulsory to do bhajans, the Hindu bhajans in the schools.
What's that? Sorry, what's that?
It's the Hindu religious prayers.
Oh, right, okay. Like assembly, for instance.
Assemblies in the mornings, the bhajans, they pray to the God and everything. That has been made compulsory in the government schools, and it's also being enforced into the other religious schools now. Abayas, which is a very common in Kashmir, and it's always been part of that, have been taken away.
Which is the gown that women wear over their clothes.
Clothes on that, the burqa, we call it, abaya in Arabic, right? That has now been enforced that they can't wear that. Hijab, they can't wear that. Students, our sisters are getting persecuted. We have got over 10...
What's the population of Kashmir?
The valley itself at the moment, according to the last census, is 9 million. Right. Kashmiris.
And the Muslims out of those are what?
85%.
Right, okay.
Right. Then you've got the Jammu, which has got another 6 million. Majority is non-Muslims there because of what I've already said. But then on the top of this, India, trying to change the demography, issued over 4 million domicile certificates to the Indians who reside outside.
4 million.
4 million. Now, if you look at the valley itself, where you've got 85, you had out of 9 million, you had 7 million, at least let's say 6 million, right, as Muslims.
Yeah.
If we did have a referendum, the vote would go in favor of Muslim. But with the 4 million now,
Yeah.
that's kind of
It'll
tilted.
be a split. It'll be 50-50.
Absolutely. Again, it's against the international law.
Yeah.
It's against the United Nations agreements, right? But the world's still silent on it, right? Muslims are being killed. They've been...
What institutions do Kashmir's Muslims, what do they have? Do they have, I don't know, do they have an assembly, parliament? Do they have political parties? What do they have in terms of institutions that maintain their identity?
In Kashmir,
Yeah?
everything we had, for example, we had the political parties, Jamaat-e-Islami, we had the Ahl Hadith. Jamaat-e-Islami played a very important role in ensuring the welfare, the religion, the schools, most of them were opened by the Jamaat-e-Islami's earlies to ensure that we actually retain our religion, our identity. They've all been closed down. Jamaat-e-Islami is banned in Kashmir.
It's banned.
It's banned, right? It's blacklisted. JKLF has been blacklisted. People who used to run this organization have been imprisoned now. They're not, and recently they were forced to join the election campaigns, right? Unfortunately, given at this scenario, there isn't any religious freedom in Kashmir. Mosques have been shut down, right? Our Jamia Masjid, the Mir Wise who actually led it, was shut down for months and months. He's not allowed to lead the prayers in there, on the Jummah prayers. There is a complete, there's a, what can I say, a full thrust of force that's been led by the BJP government. Right, and again, we need to understand the ideology of the BJP government. It stems back from 1931, where it was actually started. There's a concept they call Akhand Bharat, or the Big Bharat, right? That ideology is very, very close, and it does stem from the Nazism. That BJP, the Hindus, are the rightful owners, and they are the upper castes. And what they're trying to do now...
It's the supremacist ideology.
And they believe that the whole of South Asia, Middle East, all the way up to the Kaaba, belongs to the Hindus.
Oh, wow.
The Kaaba is their center point, the temple, where the idols were located. And one of their objectives is to change this whole demography from India all the way to Mecca, change it to a Hindu nation. Akhand Bharat, the greater India, the greater Bharat.
I have to say that I mean, this is news to me, and I have to say that I would assume that it is also news to more than 99% of Muslims and residents of that particular region. And why is it that no one knows? Why is it that no one knows?
BJP openly advocates Akhand Bharat. It is in the media, but unfortunately...
It's like greater Israel.
It's greater India, greater than Israel. Right? And this is where the nexus comes close, very close to what the Israel is doing in Palestine. India is doing, the BJP government especially, is doing that to the Muslims. And the other non-Hindus, I'm not just going to say it's Muslims, that is the second biggest religion in India. But that's where it's targeting even the Christians, right, within India. Their concept of Akhand Bharat stretches all the way from India on to the Mecca, where they openly proclaim that Kaaba is one of their key temples. There were idols found in there, and that's their justification. It used to be one of their gods. That is what they're going to change it all the way from the Middle East, from India going into the South Asia, into the Middle East, and up to the Mecca. That's where the ultimate Akhand Bharat ends.
Tell me about the relationship with Pakistan first. I'm interested in knowing about the relationship with with the Muslim world, the OIC, for instance, but I'll come to that. But first of all, Pakistan, because this is an interesting case in my estimation. That whilst Pakistan continues to talk about Kashmir and it considers it's something of almost a national security issue.
Absolutely.
But I sometimes get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, I get the sense sometimes that Kashmir to Pakistan is a political volleyball. I mean, there's good statements, but there's no actions. And whether it's because it doesn't want to heighten tensions with India to a particular level, whereby, you know, you have the prospect of probably all-out conflict, which is fine. But sometimes, you know, I get the sense that this is sort of an issue that is useful to Pakistan. It creates a Pakistani sort of zeal and identity and fervor and the such, and loyalty to the state. But there's nothing really being done about it. That's the sense that I get. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I kind of agree to a certain point, but at the same time, I think we have to take everything in its own respect.
Of course.
There's been over 3 wars between India and Pakistan over Kashmir.
True.
Right?
True.
You got the 47, you got the 65, you got the 71, you got the 90s war of Kargil.
Yeah.
Again. And yes, it is being cautious because really, you know, with over 900,000 armed forces present, there is only one solution from my point of view. It's not just political and diplomatic. Yeah, it has to be an all.
It has to be?
It has to be a militia war as well.
Right.
We've seen, you know, we talked about resolutions.
Are you talking about a resistance?
I'm
to
talking
the
about full
occupation?
resistance, absolutely. Yeah.
And is that present? Is there anything of the such? Is that present?
When we look at the Kashmir history, wherever there's been a resistance, India has always tried to come to the negotiation table. When it came to the negotiation table in 1990s, is because the resistance was present. I'm not going to quote my example. I'm not going to quote. Let me quote, Boutros Ghali's statement.
The former Secretary.
Absolutely, when they invaded Iraq.
Yeah.
He was asked a question. You could have resolved this diplomatically. And his answer was, diplomacy works, but diplomacy with power works better.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got India at this point, which is economically stronger, right? Population-wise, is stronger. It's got a support from the West because of its ideology against China. India is not willing to come to the negotiation tables and talk about Kashmir on the diplomatic levels. We've got 18 United Nations resolutions that provide legitimacy of a Kashmir, that recognize Kashmir as a disputed territory, which has got an agreed procedure about the referendum or the plebiscite, right? A right to self-determination that needs to be given. None of them have been adhered or by India, right? Not followed through. We had Article 370 that was embedded into the Indian Constitution in 1950s based on an agreement that the current administration by India is a temporary and is subject to those 3 key areas.
Okay.
Right. Again, that got revoked, again, internationally, and illegal against the international law. We've got over 150 bilateral agreements between the 3 parties. It's only bilateral. So the agreements are either between Indian government and the Kashmir's puppeteer governments, India and Pakistan, or a verbal agreement between Pakistan and Kashmir.
Yeah.
Right. None of them. The diplomacy hasn't worked with India. That's a language it's not willing to work. And you tell me, Anas, you're a lot more scholar of the history. Give me one Muslim nation which was ruled or occupied by a non-Muslim that has been given freedom based on pure diplomacy.
Yeah. No, it doesn't happen.
Right. I don't believe that's possible.
People don't give you gifts.
The United Nations gives the people right of the occupied land, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Kashmir, whether it's Syria, any land that's occupied by a foreign country. The United Nations, the international law, the ICC, the ICJ, gives the inhabitants, the indigenous people, the right to resistance, to protect themselves, to protect their land, to protect their liberties, to protect their democracy. Right? Why aren't the people of Kashmir? If the whole world came behind Ukraine to protect themselves against Russia, why not with Palestine? Why not with Kashmir? Are these lesser of human beings? I don't believe diplomacy alone will work, but I leave it to the people, I leave it to the world to prove me wrong, and I hope to be proven wrong. You ask what's Pakistan doing, or where it is. Pakistan as a country, I believe, isn't just for the Kashmir. The whole Ummah is a backing for most of the Muslim countries for the Ummah around the world across. It's, 76 years we've been occupied.
Yeah.
76 years is the age of Pakistani nation.
Yeah.
Within these 76 years, it's become a nuclear country, first Muslim nuclear country. The animosity across the globe against Pakistan isn't just by India, it's across.
Yeah.
I don't see any country, while United States tried to help Pakistan befriend, their real interest doesn't lie in Pakistan. One, it's a Muslim nation. They needed it for Afghanistan against Russia. They used it, it's gone. Now they're trying to break it internally. Pakistan has its own problems. They realize, we realize, the world realizes, the only way India is willing to talk about Kashmir is when there is a resistance movement in Kashmir. But if that sparks again, I don't believe it's just going to be limited to Kashmir. You've got three key stakeholders that surround Kashmir, and all three of them are nuclear power. Right?
Iran,
You've got India, Pakistan, and China.
China
is not going to.
Iran is coming.
And Iran's coming there as well.
Yeah.
But we've got three countries which are nuclear powered. While India has a military might, Pakistan, as you know, as Imran Khan said in the United Nations, the only option they will have is to resort to the nuclear force.
Yeah.
Right? And at that point, India is not going to stay back. China is not going to stay back.
Of course.
It will be an all-out nuclear war. And that's not just going to impact Kashmir.
Yeah. No, it's going to burn out the entire region.
Entire region, it's going to go across the globe. Right? And that is something we're trying to avoid. We have got a peaceful method. We've got a peaceful way that India and Pakistan have agreed, that the international community has guaranteed. You had Britain, who was the key party to that agreement, to those 18 resolutions, which guaranteed the people of Kashmir the right of self-determination. We want to go through that. But ultimately, as a person who's born in that occupied land, right? I was born there. I feel the pain. The whole world feels the pain. And you don't need to be a Kashmiri to feel that pain. You've seen what's happening in Palestine. You've seen what's happening in Kashmir. If the world does not take a notice of what's happening in Kashmir and then gets involved proactively with the measures that actually make a difference on the ground. Unfortunately, what you're telling the people of Kashmir, what you're telling the people of Palestine is, look, guys, we don't care about you until they've got only one way left, which is to retaliate, just like the way Hamas did. Just like, what choice are you leaving with us? India has blocked our political voices. All our political leaders that stand for the right of self-determination, that stand against the illegal Indian occupation, have been imprisoned, either in the Tihar prison or somewhere else in India, which nobody knows. Right? Our media is blocked and censored. Right? We've seen a clear-cut difference that the social media makes. We've got news coming in from Palestine. People watch it. People see the atrocities that are happening to the kids. The genocide has been happening for the last 10, 20 years in Kashmir, but the media is censored. It doesn't allow. Anybody that goes onto the Twitter in Kashmir and reports anything for the resistance movement, for the freedom, for the liberties of Kashmir, gets jailed, gets banned. Right? Media is completely censored. Internet's blocked. India is rated as #1 country where most of the internet blocks took place last year and the year before. We don't have that avenue left. We've got no external support to go through. 2016, 2018, both incidents, you look at the whole Kashmir Valley was blocked for a year. There was no food, no medication that was allowed into Kashmir. The people survived through their agrarian skill sets they had, because Kashmir has historically been an agrarian society, right? Everybody has a land, and that's where they cultivate it. Now, in order to get rid of that, what India is doing is taking deforestation. It's taking lands away from the people of Kashmir, right? Any means where they could actually grow their own crops, food, that's been taken away. There's been a massive drive for deforestation within Kashmir on that side. That land has been utilized by India, by the foreign investors, right, that India so-called claims in, to be used for, and mostly they use for military bases, not even for the development. It claims that it's using for a development. Gulmarg, which is one of the most beautiful tourist attractions that was in Kashmir, India claimed that it was opening it up for tourism. But in reality, when you look at the pictures, when you look at the news, what's happened there is they've built armed bases there, they've built Air Force bases there. Right.
Can I ask the 6 million, 7 million or so Muslims within Kashmir, is there, I wouldn't say consensus, of course, but is there a widespread agreement on a particular solution to Kashmir? Or is there a fragmentation? Now, I'll tell you why I asked this question. Many years ago, the organization I used to represent, the Muslim Association of Britain, wanted to do something for Kashmir. Okay, we were in contact with the late Ayub Thakkar at the time, and we decided to do something public, you know, a demonstration, for instance, or a protest, or some sort of stand and conference on Kashmir. And as we started to prepare for that, we got inundated with calls. At that time, there wasn't internet, there wasn't WhatsApp and whatever, but we were receiving emails from Kashmiris, or at least claiming to be Kashmiris, saying that this was a bad idea. And the reason was because there are so many divisions in terms of what the resolution is. And therefore, okay, so protest against the human rights abuses, but don't bring in, you know, the Kashmiri issue in terms of a political discussion. And to be honest, we said to ourselves, listen, we want to bring people together. We don't want to divide them. So we stood back. We said, fine, there seems to be something here that we don't understand, and we don't want to get involved in something we don't understand. So, you know, our statements from then on remained on the humanitarian level, which, okay, fine, everyone can agree with. But in terms of politics, and this is what I want to understand, is there, once again, not a unanimous, but is there a widespread agreement on what the resolution is?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a kind of agree. So as an organization, I worked with pretty much almost all the parties that have directly or indirectly anything to do with the Kashmir issue. Right? Whether you talk about Pakistani political parties, as in the Azad Kashmir political parties, or the Indian occupied parties that represent any ideology. Firstly, I want to get a message clear to the audience itself. The issue of Kashmir is not a human rights issue or a humanitarian issue. The core is it is a political issue of an ideology.
It's not a natural disaster. It's a man-made catastrophe.
Man-made. The people of Kashmir, who are majoritarily always have been Muslims, have never been part of India, never want to be part of India as a majority. Right? Our culture is different. Our religion is different. We didn't have cinemas till last 10 years. We didn't have alcohol shops there. Right? Now India's introduced cinemas, alcoholic shops, wine shops, bars, drugs, right? In order to ethnically cleanse the people of Kashmir, the Muslims, they're the target. The issue has always been a political, I would say a Muslim issue, a religious issue. But I'm going to stick to the word political issue, right? We've never been a part of India. India claims that the Maharaja of Kashmir signed an instrument of accession in 1947 in order to save itself. Fine, let's agree for a minute, but that instrument of an accession has got a clear-cut conditions in it. India could only govern foreign relations, currency, and communications and defense. These are the only three things. And there's a clear-cut paragraph by Maharaja in the instrument of accession that India is presenting, which clearly says the sovereignty of the princely state resides under the Maharaja. The rest of everything, India could not interfere. This instrument of accession has been challenged by various scholars, and we've never seen the original copy. Nobody ever has, that India claims to have. Right? So the people of Kashmir...
What's the standing of this?
None. There isn't. They can't produce the original copy.
So if anyone asks for this, no one can produce a document and say...
Nobody has produced it. We have seen copies which people have turned around and said, you know, that's not the original. And when you look at the timeline of Maharaja Hari Singh, India claims that instrument of accession was signed on the 26th of October, 1947. Maharaja Hari Singh was on the travels at that point. That's a historical document. Couldn't have signed. The presence of the Indian forces that they claim came on the 27th of October. But the United Nations documents clearly state that they were already present on the Srinagar airport on 25th and 26th of October, way before the instrument of accession was signed. They were also present and complicit in the massacre of Jammu, which killed over 375,000 Kashmiri Muslims in the November of 1946. Right? Yeah. What gave them that authority? When you look at their claim that it was the Maharaja who signed that agreement, it was his decision. But when you look at the history, the Junagadh, Hyderabad, and other states, where the majority of the population were Hindus and the Maharaja was a Muslim, it was the people who made the decision, right? Why do we have a different case for Kashmir? And not only that, as I said, there was a point which I made earlier. A National Assembly was formed in 1930s that took the powers away from the Maharaja and gave it to the people. So the decision even to accede to India or Pakistan could not have been legally made by Maharaja. It had to be made by the people. Just like we did in the United Kingdom in the Brexit. It wasn't Her Majesty the Queen that made that decision. It was the people who took the vote in the referendum. So should it have been in the Kashmir issue. It should have come through. That never happened. So their legitimacy to saying that Kashmir is a part of India doesn't exist. Right, that's one. Yeah. Coming to your point, that the question that you asked, do we have a unity? Absolutely, we have a unity at the point which says we need freedom from the illegal Indian occupation. That nobody is denying. Now, after that, as a part of the governance, whether the majority of people decide to accede to Pakistan,
right, or to remain independent,
or be independent, or to accede to India, I'm going to, because there is a certain population. Let it be less than 2%, but there is.
There is.
Right? If they want to accede to India, that is their choice. But the first thing first.
There needs to be a referendum.
There needs to be a referendum. There needs to be a freedom from the illegal occupation.
Of course.
Yeah, that's the first, because you can't have a referendum when you've got 900,000 occupied.
Of course, absolutely.
So the first point is freedom from the illegal occupation. Right? Once we obtain that, then we can have a referendum. And that is a point. Whether, for example, JKLF, who believe that Kashmir should be an independent party, territory, even they agree to that point. Let's get the freedom, let's have a referendum, and whatever the majority decides, we'll go with it. You got the, Jamaat Islami or the rest of the people who believe in pro-Pakistan, right? Again, same concept. Freedom from the illegal occupation, referendum, and then whatever the majority choose. Now, what India is trying to do, and unfortunately it's various, institutions across the globe that are supported. We know for a fact a report was produced by the European Disinformation. There are over 200 agencies, fake agencies that India had created across the globe that were peddling fake news on Kashmir and Pakistan. Right? They've been shut down. What India is trying to do is create a confusion across the globe that the people of Kashmir are divided. They don't know what they want. Right? It's a humanitarian issue. It's not a humanitarian issue. The people of Kashmir are not fighting for an equal right under the Indian Constitution. We're not fighting for Article 370 or 35A. Yes, they were part of our Constitution, our own Jammu and Kashmir Constitution that was formed way before India and Pakistan. Article 35A was part of that Constitution that protected the interests of the indigenous people. Right? It wasn't something that India gave. The only thing that India had agreed under their constitution, which is exactly what Pakistan has agreed, India called it Article 370, that provided the conditions or the backbone of the temporary administration that was agreed on those three conditions. Pakistan has got an Article 257 in their constitution for Azad Kashmir, right, which says whenever the referendum takes place, and even after the referendum takes place, if the people of Kashmir choose to accede to Pakistan, that relationship will again be determined by the people of Kashmir. Do they want full integration? Do they want part integration? Do they just want certain elements or they don't want just maybe an open borders, just like we have for Switzerland, right? That decision will be taken by the people of Kashmir. So that article, that guarantee is under the Pakistani constitution as well. So when you say, is there a unity? I believe, having worked and coming from the ground, yes, there is a unity, that it is a political issue. And there's only one solution, which is right of self-determination for the whole people of Kashmir. Yeah? But that can only happen when we're free from the illegal occupation. Right? Unless India takes that step diplomatically, which is beneficial not just for Pakistan or India or China, but that is the only beneficial of peaceful solution for the whole globe.
What are your efforts within the Muslim world and I mean, what I'm interested in is trying to find out exactly who are you talking to, who's listening to you, what kind of, let's say, proposals you're giving. I mean, I totally, absolutely understand and agree with you, by the way. I mean, this is from a personal point of view, agree with you that any state of occupation is an evil that needs to be removed. I absolutely agree with that and subscribe to that. But just like in Palestine, there are some factions within Palestine that think, well, you know, we need to take it step by step, and maybe we'll accept a two-state solution first, and then whatever, regardless of whether we agree or not. Are there such political scenarios being put forward to international agencies? And like I said, who are you talking to within the region, within the Muslim world, and also beyond on international level?
Alhamdulillah, I think there's a lot of effort from the people of Kashmir trying to reach out to wherever we can. OIC, there's a special committee on Kashmir, and it's got a special seat, right, which presents the views of Kashmir. But because Kashmir is not recognized as a state, as an entity, it doesn't get the attention that it needs. Pakistan is a part of this dispute. They're party to the dispute. They are the voice on those levels that we have, whether that's the OIC, United Nations, ICC, ICJ, diplomatic levels, right? Now, on my level, yes, we try to be there. We've got, you know, alhamdulillah, people who are trying to be vocal about it. You've got Brother Muzammil, you've got others who are working, Dr. Ghulam Nabi Fai, who's from the United States, Ghulam Nabi Mir. We had Dr. Ayub Tucker here, may Allah bless him, General Fellows. My father has been involved in this since 1980s. My grandfather was involved in this since 1960s from the Raj Shumari, right? I'm the third generation within my family, alhamdulillah. Our work, our efforts will continue to do, right? We've interacted with the parliaments, we've interacted with international institutions, whether those are humanitarian organizations like Red Cross. We try our best, but then we have to realize and accept the occupier isn't a small state. It is a massive state.
And it's a massive state of interest.
Absolutely, and especially now,
powerhouse.
It's an economic powerhouse. I remember when I came to the UK, I started my first role in 2000, early 2003s. I'm not going to mention any company names here, but there were only about 7 or 8 of us who were from the South Asian background. The same company called me back again about 5 years ago.
5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Right.
65% of their staff is based in India. And we're talking over a company that employs over 200,000 people across the globe.
And that goes across the board.
Yeah, that goes across.
Absolutely.
It is an economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
If we are 2 people, we go to the United Nations every year, Human Rights Council in Geneva. If we go 3 people, they've already got 20 people over there lined up, right, with narratives which don't have any. But because they've got that economical background, their might, they get that. But one thing, alhamdulillah, I'm hopeful, right? Allah never lets efforts go waste. When we look at Palestine, that was completely gone dead under the radar.
True.
Yeah, Ukraine was everywhere. Football was everywhere. True. More than, the Palestine issue. True. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to revive it, it will, right? We've got to try our best. We will keep on our efforts. We know it's a political issue. What we are doing is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There was a time when Kashmir was a top priority for the whole globe. We remember in 1990s, even Saudi Arabia came to intervene and said, we will resolve this issue. Then the Kuwait war took place, right? This went sideline. Even now, we have international community that wants to resolve this, but it's not the top priority at the moment. Kashmir isn't. It will come to the top priority. Yes, it's a test for us. It's a test for the whole world at this point. We, the people in Kashmir, we're suffering. Yeah? We have got over 10,000 women who've been raped, gang raped. The whole village, Kunan Pashpora, the whole village was cordoned by the Indian Army. Every woman from the age of 7 to the age of 65 was raped, not just raped, gang raped multiple times over the night. They're still seeking their justice. We've got, excluding the 375, which is a conserved estimate, just from the 1990s till now, we've got over 150,000 people who have given their lives for this cause. Millions have been imprisoned. The new generation that's born is exactly the same in Palestine. They're born under war. They don't know what peace is. They're not afraid of their life. They're not afraid of their death. They know they're born under the occupation. They have seen their sisters, their mothers being raped, their fathers being tortured and killed. They are becoming prone to this. And this is what my worry is, that the generation that's coming up, the violence, the oppression that they have seen, we may not see it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from that. At that point, is the world ready for their reaction? And that reaction, as I said, it's not just going to be impacting South Asia, Kashmir, India, or Pakistan. This will be a global reaction.
Do you have media? Do you have TV stations? Do you have radio stations? Do you have press?
We try to, alhamdulillah, we've got, access like yourselves over here. We don't have resources that much enough that we can actually have our own channel, and that's something we're working on. But what we're leveraging is the support that we have from the people who love the humanity, who love democracy, who understand the Kashmir issue, whether for the sake of Allah or for themselves, for the sake of humanity. That's what we're leveraging at the moment. Unfortunately, every initiative that we take, I'll take, for example, the initiatives that we did. We started a website, right, for our organization that had cases, video cases
Which
coming
language?
from Kashmir. English to start off with.
Okay.
Over here. That used to get over 30,000 attacks a day.
Attacks?
Attacks. Hacking attacks. It got shut down. We started something called Kashmir Stream that presented videos, and we wanted to form it like a library, because every time we use a YouTube or a Facebook to streamline any social media video or anything, that gets blocked, right? Our own Twitter page, my Facebook page, that's banned in India. You can't access it. They're shadow blocked. Most of you got to understand, most of these social media platforms, their support exists in India. So India is able to manipulate any social media platform, just like Israel is able to do. The Modi government, we have seen how many cases, how many times it's actually intervened, and stopped the information flow coming out. Anybody who's even written a small tweet, there was an incident that took place a couple of years ago. One of the students just supported the Pakistani cricket team in New Delhi.
Yeah.
He was imprisoned. I mean, that is the type of the oppression we're looking at in Kashmir. This, we want to, inshallah, we're looking for more help, more media channels to take on board, understand what the Kashmir issue is, and help us to socialize and mobilize and garner support across the global platform.
I'm thinking of Britain and the British Parliament. Surely we have MPs that are from Kashmiri origin, no?
Absolutely.
And you're in touch with them?
Absolutely. We're in touch with the British parliamentarians. We're in touch with the Lords that are there. Again, as I said earlier, yes, while we have a good clout in the British politics, I think out of 670 political positions, good over 150 political positions just in the councillor level, 200 positions are given to the British, Pakistani, and Kashmiri occupied. And when it comes to the MPs, we do have quite good ones. But again, that support goes only to a certain extent. What we need is a grassroots support from Britain. Right? Your MP will only raise the issue of Kashmir, or can raise the issue of Kashmir, when the constituents ask for that. Right. Because they have got their own remit that they need to fulfill. right, while on there. The policies aren't really designed or implemented by the parliament itself. They come from somewhere else. And again, what we need is people who can reach out to those institutions that create policies and explain to them what the issue is.
On the international scene, and out of the international powers that we know, the UK, Europe, America, obviously you have Russia and China and the such, but let's focus on the West. Who amongst those are, let's say, the most positive in terms of you reaching them and them being convinced with your narrative and doing something, whatever, however small it might be?
I think on the humanitarian basis, we've seen quite a good response from some of the European countries.
Okay, we're talking about countries, not communities.
Countries.
Because I understand that...
So European countries have been a little bit more positively responsive.
European countries or the EU?
European countries.
Okay.
So for example, not the whole of the EU.
Yeah.
We, United Nations published a report in 2018 on the human rights violations, and most of the recommendations were made to India. That was then supported by the EU Commission.
Right.
But again, it can't be enforced. It's an advisory report that India just like what Israel is doing at the moment. There are statements made in United Nations and it just ignores them. But there isn't any enforceability.
Right.
In terms of more favorable, what I've seen is, for example, Norway is quite favorable when it comes to the humanitarian issues of Kashmir. Right? Sweden, Denmark, Britain, to a certain extent, used to be very favorable, but now with the new regime, we see more towards the far right move compared to sort of a neutral or left sides, right? But we've still got MPs, we've still got councillors here who keep on raising this issue, who keep on creating motions for this. But ultimately, unless the policy changes through the policy makers, it will be very difficult for them.
How about in India? And I do apologize for my ignorance.
No.
But obviously, we've just had the elections. Modi has scraped through, thank God, because last time it was a landslide. So he's just scraped through. So hopefully soon he'll be out. Do you have any friends within Indian politics?
Personally, what I've seen is, irrespective of who comes into the power, the policy towards Kashmir from India has always been that this is our
So you don't have a left, like for instance, there's in Israel, sort of a mild left that.
If I would say, Congress is slightly secular and a little bit more democratic compared to BJP, which is more far right extremist, right? Again, would they be willing to come and negotiate on Kashmir? For India, it's a matter of multiple things when it comes to the Kashmir. It's a matter of their pride and face. Kashmir being majority as a Muslim area, dominant, it gives them that, kind of a leverage to say, hey, we hold with the world's largest secular country because we got Kashmir, we got Muslims, and we got. It's also an ego in there because it's an issue with Pakistan.
Of course.
If they
lose they can't Kashmir, be seen to give way to something that benefits Pakistan.
And when it comes to the politics, the elections, again, Kashmir is seen as one of those jingoistic cards, right, which is weighed by all the parties, like Modi did in the last 2 terms. I'm going to revoke Article 370. Did that. Loads of elections. We had the Budgam incident. Again, that was fake encounters there. I was used to garner the political support for Modi, right? So there's a lot in the mix for any party to come to the table. If, for example, if we expect one of the secular, more lenient parties like the Congress comes into the power, they may do some political maneuvering to keep the public happy, but ultimately, India is a country where the population is Hindu. And Akhand Bharat is now something that always used to be there, but now it's come to the open.
Right.
It's open, people accept it, and that is something that's built into their ideology. Now, any government that comes in has to retain some of those elements if they want to stay in the power. In terms of support, I think we've got loads of friends in India for the Kashmir movement. who understand the issue of Kashmir, especially when it comes to the human rights, who speak for on the behalf of the Kashmir, because even though they're Hindus, even though they're Indians, you got Arundhati Roy, you had Ved Basim, you had quite a few people who actually spoke for the people of Kashmir, who spoke for the political issue of Kashmir as well as the humanitarian issue of Kashmir. But politically, yeah, there's only one Muslim party, All India Muslim party. Again, they're very, very careful when it comes to the issue of Kashmir.
Thank you very much, Brother Zaffar.
Jazakallahu
It's been
khairan.
a pleasure.
Thank you, Brother Anas.